Buffalo Hump was a war chief of the Penateka band of the Comanche Indians. He came to prominence after the Council House fight when he led the Comanches on the Great Raid of 1840. Early life. Little is known of Buffalo Hump's early life. In 1838 he, now an important war chief, went with Amorous Man and Old Owl to Houston, where they met President Sam Houston and signed with him a treaty. He became a historically important figure when, angered by the Council House fight of 1840, he led a group of Comanches, mostly his own band plus allies from various other Comanche bands, in the Great Raid of 1840. The goal was to get revenge on the Texans who had killed 30 members of a delegation of Comanche chiefs when these had been under a flag of truce for negotiations. The Council House fight. The Comanches who came to the Council House at San Antonio in the Republic of Texas in 1840 had the intention to negotiate a peace treaty. They came under a white flag of truce, as they understood ambassadors should do. The Texans had expected the Comanches to bring several white captives as part of the agreement. At the meeting, Buffalo Hump explained he had brought all of the captives he had won. The Texans did not understand he had no power over the other bands to force them to comply with the demands. The Texans then pulled out guns and explained the Indians were now the prisoners until the rest of the captives were returned. Threatened. The Comanches, who had come without bows, lances or guns, fought back with the knives. The Texans had concealed heavily armed soldiers just outside the Council House. At the onset of the fighting, the windows and doors were opened and the soldiers outside shot into the room through them. This fight left lasting bitterness in the Comanche people, who believed unarmed ambassadors who had come in under a white flag of truce had been slaughtered. The Great Raid of 1840. Buffalo Hump was determined to do more than merely complain about what the Comanches viewed as a bitter betrayal, spreading word to the other bands of Comanches that he was raiding the white settlements in revenge. Buffalo Hump led the Great Raid of 1840. On this raid the Comanches went all the way from the plains of West Texas to the cities of Victoria and Linville on the Texas coast, in what may have been the largest organized raid by the Comanches to that point. They raided, burned, and plundered these towns. Linville was the second largest port in Texas at the time. The Battle of Plum Creek. On the way back from the sea, the Comanches were attacked by Texas Rangers and militia at the Battle of Plum Creek near Lockhart. Texas history says the Rangers, equipped with the new Colt revolvers, won this battle, but this is highly questionable as the Indians got away with a great many of the stolen horses and most of the plunder. The volunteers from Gonzales under Matthew Caldwell and from Bastrop under Ed Burleson had gathered to attempt to stop the war party, and together with all the ranger companies of East and Central Texas, moved to intercept the Indians, which they did at Plum Creek, near the city of Lockhart on August 12, 1840. 80 Comanches were reported killed in the running gun battle, unusually heavy casualties for the Indians, although they got away with the bulk of the plunder and stolen horses. Role in negotiating peaceful surrender of the Penateka band. It is notable that had the Texans ever negotiated a treaty with all the Comanche where the Comanche area had been recognized, it would have stood, and led to the return of the captives that were at the heart of the Council House disaster. Despite the Council House and the subsequent Great Raid of 1840, Sam Houston and Buffalo Hump, with other chiefs representing, for the first time, every major division of the Comanche in Texas, almost succeeded in such a treaty. In August 1843, a temporary treaty accord led to a ceasefire between the Comanches and their allies, and the Texans. In October, the Comanches agreed to meet with Houston and try to negotiate a treaty similar to the one just concluded at Fort Byrd. In early 1844, Buffalo Hump and other Comanche leaders signed a treaty at Tefuacana Creek in which they agreed to surrender white captives in toto, and to cease raiding Texan settlements. In exchange for this, the Texans would cease military action against the tribe, establish more trading posts, and recognize the boundary between Texas and Comanche area. Comanche allies, including the Wacos, Tawakonas, Kiowa, Apache and Wichita, also agreed to join in the treaty. Unfortunately, the boundary provision was deleted by the Texas Senate in the final version, which caused Buffalo Hump to repudiate the treaty, and soon a resumption of hostilities occurred. Finally, in May 1846, Buffalo Hump became convinced that even he could not continue to defy the massed might of the United States and the state of Texas, so he led the Comanche delegation to the treaty talks at Council Springs that signed a treaty with the United States. As war chief of the Penateka Comanche, Buffalo Hump dealt peacefully with American officials throughout the late 1840s and 1850s. In 1849, he guided Robert Neighbors and John S. Ford's expedition part of the way from San Antonio to El Paso, and in 1856, he sadly and finally led his people to the newly established Comanche Reservation on the Brazos River. Continuous raids from white horse thieves and squatters, coupled with his band's unhappiness over the lack of freedom and the poor food provided on the reservation, forced Buffalo Hump to move his band off the reservation in 1858. While camped in the Wichita Mountains, the Penateka band under Buffalo Hump were attacked by United States troops under the command of Marge Earl Van Dorn, allegedly not aware that Buffalo Hump's band had recently signed a formal peace treaty with the United States at Fort Arbuckle. The Van Dorn and his men killed 80 of the Comanches. Nonetheless, despite this, an aged and weary Buffalo Hump led and settled his remaining followers on the Kiowa Comanche Reservation near Fort Cobb in Indian Territory in Oklahoma. There, in spite of his enormous sadness at the end of the Comanches' traditional way of life, he asked for a house and farmland so that he could set an example for his people. Attempting to live out his life as a rancher and farmer, he died in 1870. Bibliography: Bill Raymond, Lifeways the Comanche, New York, Benchmark Books, 2000. Bryce Donnelly E. The Great Comanche Raid, Boldest Indian Attack on the Texas Republic, McGowan Booker, 1987. Comanche Skyhawks Native American Dedication. Comanche on the History Channel. Dunnigan, Ted. Ted's Arrowheads and Artifacts from the Comanche Area. Fehrenbach, Theodore Reed. The Comanches, The Destruction of a People. New York, Knopf, 1974, ISBN 0394488563. Later republished under the title The Comanches, The History of a People. Foster, Morris. Being Comanche. Frazier, Ian. Great Plains, New York. Farrar, Straus and Giroux, 1989. John, Elizabeth and A. H. Storms brewed in other men's worlds. The confrontation of the Indian, Spanish, and French in the Southwest, 1540 to 1795. College Station, TX, Texas A&M, Press, 1975. Jones, David E. Sanapia, Comanche Medicine Woman. New York, Holt, Reinhardt and Winston, 1974. Lodge, Sally. Native American People, the Comanche. Vero Beach, Florida, 32964. Rourke Publications, Inc., 1992. Lund, Bill. Native Peoples, the Comanche Indians. Mankato, Minnesota. Bridgestone Books, 1997. Mooney, Martin. The Junior Library of American Indians, the Comanche Indians. New York, Chelsea House Publishers, 1993. Native Americans, Comanche. Richardson, Rupert N. The Comanche Barrier to South Plains Settlement, A Century and a Half of Savage Resistance to the Advancing White Frontier. Glendale, CA. Arthur H. Clark Company, 1933. Rawlings, Willard. Indians of North America, the Comanche. New York, Chelsea House Publishers, 1989. Secoy, Frank. Changing Military Patterns on the Great Plains. Monograph of the American Ethnological Society, No. 21. Locust Valley, NY, J.J. Augustin, 1953. Streisguth, Thomas. Indigenous Peoples of North America, the Comanche. San Diego, Lucent Books Incorporation, 2000. The Texas Comanches, on Texas Indians. Wallace, Ernest, and E. Adamson Hobel. The Comanches, Lords of the Southern Plains. Norman, University of Oklahoma Press, 1952.